Hello there. Welcome to the 2XU podcast, where we're figuring out how a lot of these amazing solopreneurs and co-founders, basically creating a lot of value in the world, get started to getting to their superhero or their you factor. Now, today we're going to be doing our very first episode, and I thought, why not invite an amazing guest, invite an amazing person to be our very first guest for the 2XU podcast, someone I've known for literally most of my life, if not all of my life. I think I've known this person all of my life, literally since I was a baby, because our first guest is going to be no other than myself. Now, huge welcome to my guest, Le-an Lai Lacaba. Le-an, how are you doing today? Hello there, Le-an. Super excited to be here. Honored to be your very first guest on the podcast. Well, amazing. So I didn't want to waste a lot of time introducing you when you can introduce yourself very, very well. So let's go ahead and actually get started. Walk me through what were the top 3 or 5 highlights that you've had in your life that led you to this moment. Okay, so highlights on my life. So I actually started working from home when I was 15 years old. That's a lot of my journey where it has started and coming from is I found a freelance gig. Basically, I was a ghostwriter for this blog that I was became friends with the owner, and they were like, "Hey, I like your writing. Can you go ahead and actually write for me?" And of course, at 15 years old, no one was asking me for if I was 18 years old, how to get paid, and I just grabbed it as an opportunity. And then that kind of started catapulted, honestly, a lot of the other things that I have been able to do in my life. I've been starting from the writer, I became a graphic artist, a video editor, basically almost anything to do with being a content creator. I did even before content creating was a thing, because that was 2011. And then I catapulted into working more online, finding other gigs, because I kept getting also people who were hiring me just in person. I worked for our local magazine at one point in my city. And when I was 18 years old, I sadly went through Typhoon Yolanda, or Typhoon Haiyan as they're internationally called. It was a super typhoon, category 5. It was like one of the strongest to ever make landfall. And I went through this part of the storm where I basically just was thinking, okay, this is it. I'm gonna die, because the water was all up to my neck right here. And I had this split decision point of, like, at that point in my life, I was gonna be a lawyer. I was going through a really good college here in the Philippines, the more prestigious one, basically. And my mom's and I's path at that point was that I would become a lawyer, I would work overseas, and be able to, send money home and take care of my siblings, so on and so forth. That was a plan. And in that split second of me thinking that I was going to drown, I had this moment where, oh crap, I'm going to, if I survive this, I'm going to live a life worth writing about. So then that's kind of what I did. I actually left college, but I basically just finished up my third year of college, and then left basically my hometown. I moved to the city that I am in now, which is Cebu City. And ever since then, it's just been one adventure after the other. I joined this startup publishing company where there were like 3 employees, and then we grew 10, and then they were like, hey, we're going to start this other company who wants to run this publishing company that we have, can train you up. And for me, as like, I don't know if you can tell that I'm a really big bookworm, I wanted to yep, I'll go ahead and actually I'll do this. I want to learn how to start and run businesses. So I raised my hand. I was 19 years old, and by the time that I was 20, I was trained up and groomed basically to take over that startup company. 3 years later, I got it to a point where we had, I think, almost 20 employees, and we got to the point where I could take 2 months off, and I actually tested it out where I didn't have to be in the business, and that was an amazing feeling to have. And then it basically got to the point where I was like, okay, what else can I do? What else can we start? And then 2XU started off as a course for people on how to hire a virtual assistant. It's kind of how everything kind of started, and then we jokingly called it How to Be a Good Boss Online 101. And started doing speeches. Basically, we spoke in Manila, we spoke in Malaysia, and Singapore. One of the students that we had in Singapore said, I love your course, can you just do this for me? So that's kind of the tipping point of like how we started 2XU, is we got to the point where someone else wanted to have us just do our expertise, do our own thing, and actually hire their virtual assistant. We were able to do that. And of course, since then, we've kind of just grown as a company. I've gone through a lot of things in the last 4 years in 2XU, but that's basically the highlights of how I got here and who I am. So as you were telling me, wonderful story, by the way. I have heard it a million times, but I'm always amazed every single time that I hear it. So thank you so much for telling me your story. Now tell me more about how you became that entrepreneur that you are today. Like, what were the challenges? Did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was that the journey that you wanted to go on? Tell me more about that. So growing up, basically, my mom, who sadly has passed away for 3 years now, but when I was growing up, she had all of these side gigs. She would be selling rattan bags, or a friend from like the US would ask her to sell a few things. So growing up, I saw different variations of how my mom kind of hustled basically and found different things. So in my head, I was like, oh, maybe entrepreneurship could be something I could go into. And when I was going through basically the usual career path, I was like, oh, maybe no, maybe I'm just meant to kind of run other people's businesses. Especially when I got trained up to be CEO, I was like, okay, maybe this is kind of the path for me. But I kept having this little nudge in my head of like, I want to start my own business. I want to create something. And turns out that was the thing that I wanted to do. I'm really good at creating and building things from scratch. And that was kind of the passion and where it all came from. Plus, to start 2XU, I had this goal, this vision of I want to have more Filipinos be able to work from home. And to be able to do that, I needed to find entrepreneurs who were willing to hire remote employees basically and educate them how to have remote employees. So that's kind of how 2XU started. Is even though it did start as that course, it still came from my core of my passion of helping a lot of people be able to work from home, work remotely, to have the choice basically to stay and be there for their kids. Because for me, my dad was a overseas worker. I would only see him once or twice a year. So that was kind of the evolution of my path. So what are you doing right now to kind of have 2XU stand out from the rest? Like, you've done so much in the past. You started up very, very young, but it sounds like as you've gone through your own entrepreneurial journey, you know that there's going to be a lot of competitors, a lot of people who do have their own virtual assistant agencies nowadays as well. How are you, or what are you doing basically to kind of stand out from that market? Now, for common challenges that I went through, a lot of it is people. Like that was kind of thing that, so I'm a big systems nerd. So I can create processes, I can create things in my sleep, I can build things, but I did struggle a lot of the time on when it came to hiring the right people, when it came to keeping the right people as well. And there was a lot of time, there were a lot of lessons basically that I had to go through to be able to get to the point where I could build systems where I can take care of people rather than letting the systems take care of them basically. I had times where I would accidentally burn someone out because I didn't know their own capacity. I didn't know yet how to manage like a team. This is the first full year that I've had a management team ever, other than the people that I worked with. So I basically had to learn a lot when it came to how to have the right people and then how to take care of the right people once we had them into XU. So it's still a constant thing. I think that I'm still going to keep learning how to be a better and better manager, how to be a better leader instead of 2XU. But that is the thing, like both sides also, not just employees, but clients, like how to not say yes to everyone who comes into 2XU, because there's going to be a finite amount of people who I can really serve, like I can give a lot of the 2XU value into. And there's going to be a finite amount of people who would be a good match also of taking care of their EAs. I focus a lot on getting clients for our EAs who are actually happy to work with them, and not just thinking that they're going to be their next slave or something. So those are kind of the two sides of it. Again, it's not just finding and getting and keeping the right people inside of 2XU, but it's also the clients that we work with, because of course who we work with, the EAs are going to be working with. There has to be that good win-win situation on both sides. Amazing. Well, nowadays also there's of course the rise of AI, the rise of the future of work, which is remote or whatever hybrid that a lot of people are seeing. So for you, what is the future of 2XU for you? Like, how are you evolving in your industry? Are you starting other businesses? Are you growing 2XU? What's kind of the next steps that you're thinking of? So as I said earlier, I'm a big systems and processes nerd, for lack of a better term. So that's kind of how I've kind of had 2XU stand out, is we have systems, we have processes, we have templates to make the process almost seamless and easy for both of our clients and our EAs to get started, to make sure they're working on the right tasks, to have the right systems basically in place, and then training up their EA to becoming that second brain. That's why, we joke around and we say, this is how you 2XU, because you're getting a second brain within 2XU. So that's kind of the main way of how we've been able to provide a lot of really good value for our clients, because we have the systems. We can start predicting when things are, we know at the 3-month mark, the EA is going to start getting overwhelmed. So they'll need more support. 6-month mark, the client will start already giving them some more of the management style kind of tasks and outcomes. So we know the evolution of what that looks like, what an EA goes through in those cycles and what the client goes through in those cycles. So then we can better basically just support them with the journey, with the path that they're going through as well. So what kind of value do you think the 2XU itself as a business, like as you've grown it, what kind of value are you trying to create in the world with it? Like, what's the evolution? How do you want that to grow? What does that look like for you? So right now in 2XU, we've actually changed our phrasing last year, where we're now AI enabled executive assistants inside of 2XU. It's because I do see the rise of AI, the rise of remote work as the future. That's what I've always believed in, is that people will get to the point where they'll be more accepting of like, hey, we just work anywhere. However, I do know that a lot of people, it's a little bit harder to cope with that lifestyle. So honestly, for the future of the industry, the future of where 2XU is going, a lot of it is more AI focused, is training our EAs in automations and how to use AI tools, how to make sure that they are making basically the full capacity of just using it, and as well as there'll be an evolution for sure of people who know how to use AI and people who don't know how to use AI, which we're trying to make sure that our EAs on the first side of knowing how to use AI. So then AI can only do so much. They still need people who can prompt them, who can train them. So I am training our EAs to be that AI kind of prompt engineers, so that they can withstand basically as the evolution, as it grows, and what that looks like for the future as well. And I've always been a big supporter of people becoming digital nomads, of having the same freedom that I do. Like, I went to Singapore last month. Other of my employees also watched like Taylor Swift or other concerts that were outside of the Philippines. So that's kind of the vision and the goal still, is being able to get to that point where people can choose to work anywhere. It's just then to the point of where and how they want to work. For the value of 2XU, the biggest thing I guess is that we are a multiplier of it. Like, whenever we have clients who come in, they're creating some sort of value in the world, and we want to be that multiplier. I keep playing on the name of the company is literally called 2XU because we're multiplying on that. So we have clients who are fitness coaches, who are mindset coaches. We have clients who are business consultants. We have clients who are planners for, city planners for their area, basically. So they're creating value in some way in whatever it is that they're doing, and we're just there to multiply it. Our value is being that extension of them, being that second brain for them. So then for our EAs, a lot of their own focus is being able to learn as well from our clients, from people who are creating value in the world. And that's kind of the win-win thing that I'm always hoping for, is that both EAs and the clients get benefit from getting to know each other, from having one another in the business, in their lives as well. So I guess that's kind of the value, is just being that multiplier. And for those, let's say there's another Le-an who might be like 23, 22 years old, and they want to start their own virtual assistant agency or their own business, whatever that looks like. What kind of advice do you have for them as they're getting started? I guess if you're someone who is like in their early 20s, like I remember watching Gary Vaynerchuk at that age, and getting one of the things that kind of stood out always for me, it still does, is 20s you're supposed to be experimenting. It's not supposed to be you figuring out what you want to do for the rest of your life. It's you trying to figure out who you are, so then you can do the things that you want to do for the rest of your life. So in my early 20s, I did almost everything and anything. Like, yes, I was running the publishing company, but I was also doing 2 or 3 other businesses that I had at that time. Even now, I even have like other basically more passive income kind of things that I just have running in the background. So if you are starting up your own business, you're curious what that looks like, you want to do it for yourself, kind of start with where you're at, experiment and fail a couple of times, because that's honestly one of the biggest accelerators that you can do for yourself, is to experiment and fail. So if you are trying to figure out what it looks like to be an entrepreneur, to start with where you're at, experiment, find out if there's a need that you see other people have, or if there's a luxury that other people are willing to pay for. Whatever that looks like, just experiment. Just kind of see and test it out, push it out on social media, launch it without even preparing, and because that will prepare you for the next time. So kind of just, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, there's so much nowadays, there's so much growth, there's so much, other skills that you can learn. It's not anymore just the things that were there when I was at that age, that you do have more opportunities just because there's more information out there. You now have AI, you have ChatGPT to learn from. From there, just start with what you're curious about and just just do it, just launch. Now, as you're creating a lot of really good value in the world, if you would want to imagine like you had another Le-an beside you, you were able to actually duplicate yourself, you're able to build a second brain, what would that look like for you? Like, would you want a second Le-an, an extension of you? Do you want other things in the world? Like, what does that look like for you? Really good question. So I would rather just have people be themselves, to be honest. Like, it sounds cheesy, but I would like to have parts of what I've learned, what I've done towards other people. Like, I would rather have that they would carry on lessons that they would learn. Like, I'm always a big believer that everyone is here for a story that they have to unfold themselves, whatever that looks like. Whether it's them starting their own business, whether it's them trying to do X, Y, and Z in their life, they're here for a reason. They're here for a story that's about to unfold. If I had to have a second brain, I would love to just have a digital version of it, not just an actual other Le-an. Because if there are other people who say like, oh, I want to be like you, which I do have, I have heard that before, I would rather that they just be themselves and find what that path looks like for them. And for a second brain, I would just love to have an extended RAM sometimes in my head, maybe just an additional power, or just an extended memory as well, because sometimes I do forget a few things from time to time. And finally, Le-an, my favorite question to ask is, what do you think makes you you? What is the superpower that you bring into the world as you're creating a lot of this amazing value within 2XU, within your life, within everything else that you have going on? What makes you you? What makes me me? What's my superpower? So I've always said my superpower is in building and creating things. So what that means for me is like starting a business, starting projects and crafting them, creating systems out of it, and getting people together around it. That's kind of always been my superpower. It's just creation. Like, I create things out of my own brain. I create systems. I create things that I didn't, I thought I had this thought in my head and I can make it into reality. That's kind of my superpower, is I can make things that I just imagine into something real. Now, whether or not it works, it's up to questionable things depending on what you're looking at. But that is my superpower, is being able to create. Well, thank you so much, Le-an, for joining us today. It has been amazing to interview you, to get to know you a little bit better than I didn't think that I knew a lot of the stories that you had for me. And do you have anything to say as you close out this episode? Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me again as your first guest. As anything to check out, please go ahead and check out our 2XU scorecard if you're thinking of hiring your own virtual assistant. It also will guide you on what are the things that you need to prepare before then. And if you're a virtual assistant yourself, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel. We post every Sunday basically on videos on how to get started as a virtual assistant, to hopefully grow more of my vision of helping a million Filipinos to work from home. And again, thank you so much for having me. Again, thank you so much, Le-an, and thank you for everyone else who's listening to this, for tuning in to the very first episode of the 2XU podcast. I would love to know you guys' thoughts, your questions, guests that you want to see on this podcast. Since this is the very first, I wanted this to be a little bit funny, a little bit casual, a little bit just I'm interviewing, myself. So then, as we are inviting basically more and more other amazing guests who are coming into the 2XU podcast, this can also be a little bit of vibe. The passion, or the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is I wanted to just tell more of other people's stories. I'm super curious how entrepreneurs are starting their own business. I'm curious like how they're evolving, and also the value that they're creating in the world, and of course their superpower that made them, hopefully to inspire you to either pursue the business that you want, or even just push more on the career that you have, but maybe with a little different perspective. So I'm looking forward to see you guys hear more on the 2XU podcast. Again, I am your host, Le-an Lai Lacaba. If you guys are tuning in through YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button right there, as we're adding more content basically on this own channel. If you guys are listening anywhere else, same thing, hit like, subscribe wherever you are listening. And of course, make sure to check out the 2XU Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere else for more updates on the 2XU podcast. I hope you guys have an amazing day, and remember that small steps matters. And I'll see you in the next video or the next episode of the 2XU podcast.